night, they hunted their own. What kind of society would train its young men to creep through the dark, not to fight an enemy army, but to kill their own slaves? In Sparta, this was not a crime. It was tradition. Every year, under cover of darkness, young Spartan warriors moved silently through the fields and villages, hunting the people who fed them, built their homes, and worked their land. These people were the helots, a conquered population forced into slavery. And the annual slaughter, known as a cruelty, was more than murder. It was a calculated act of terror, meant to keep the helots in a constant state of fear. Ancient sources like Plutarch claim that the Spartan government openly declared war on the helots each year, a legal loophole, so that killing them would not be considered murder. To the helots, this meant nowhere was safe, not even their own homes. The people who outnumbered their masters. The helots were not foreign slaves bought in a market. They were the original inhabitants of the land Sparta controlled, mostly from Messenia, a fertile region west of Sparta. After being conquered in brutal wars, they and their descendants were bound to the land. They outnumbered Spartans by as much as 7-1, according to some estimates, and that terrified the Spartan elite. The helots worked the farms, providing the food that kept the Spartan warriors free to train for war all year. Without the helots, Sparta's entire system would collapse. But numbers were a threat. A single uprising could overwhelm Sparta's small citizen army. So the Spartans ruled with fear, constant, deliberate, state-approved fear. The cruelty, Sparta's silent terror. The cruelty was unlike anything in other Greek city-states. Young Spartan men, often teenagers who had just completed their military training, were sent into the countryside with minimal weapons, sometimes only a knife. They were told to hide during the day and move at night. Their mission, kill helots who seemed too strong, too defiant, or simply too numerous. According to Plutarch, these killings were not done in battle. They were ambushes carried out in isolation. Victims might be farmers in their fields or workers returning home. It was state-sanctioned assassination, dressed up as a rite of passage. And it taught young Spartans not just how to kill, but how to control through terror. A festival of blood. One of the most chilling details in the ancient accounts is that these killings often took place after a public ritual. Every year, Spartan officials called the Ephors would declare war on the helots during a religious festival. This was not symbolic. It was a legal act that allowed Spartans to kill helots without facing charges in court. Imagine the message. Before the festival, you are a subject, abused but alive. After the festival, you are officially fair game. The helot's life. Life as a helot was a strange mix of ordinary labor and constant threat. They worked the land, raising crops and livestock, delivering a large share of their harvest to their Spartan masters. They could marry, have families, and keep a small portion of their produce, but they had no legal rights, no protection from abuse, and no guarantee of safety. A helot could be beaten, humiliated, or killed without trial. Some accounts say they were forced to wear specific clothing, like caps made of dogskin, to mark their status. Others describe public humiliations, being made to get drunk on wine, so Spartan youths could mock them as examples of bad behavior. The goal was to remind the helots, every day, that they were nothing in the eyes of the state. Fear of rebellion. Spartan cruelty was not mindless. It was fueled by fear. History records several helot uprisings. The most famous followed a devastating earthquake in 464 BCE, which destroyed parts of Sparta and killed many citizens. The helots saw their chance and revolted. The rebellion lasted years, and the Spartans struggled to crush it. Some sources say the helots fortified themselves in the stronghold of Ithome, forcing the Spartans into a long siege. Even after the revolt was suppressed, the memory haunted Sparta. Every helot was a potential rebel. Every gathering of helots was a threat. And so, The cryptia and other brutal measures continued, year after year. Humiliation as a weapon. Physical violence was only part of Spartan control. Humiliation was just as important. Plutarch tells of helots being forced to sing degrading songs about themselves or to dance in ridiculous ways for the amusement of Spartan youths. They were sometimes made to wear absurd clothing in public, a constant reminder of their inferior position. Alcohol was another tool. Helots would be forced to drink heavily in front of young Spartans, to show how drunkenness led to weakness and foolishness. The message was clear. Helots were examples of what not to be. These acts might seem petty compared to killing, but they served the same purpose, to break pride, to make resistance seem hopeless. The numbers game. The Spartans were careful in how they managed the helot population. Killing the strongest each year kept the number of potential leaders low. Spreading helots out across the countryside kept them from organizing easily, and the threat of instant death meant that any talk of rebellion had to be whispered, if it happened at all. Some historians believe this constant pressure was a deliberate policy, a slow-motion form of population control. Others argue it was psychological warfare, designed to convince the helots that resistance was impossible. When Sparta needed the helots, despite all this cruelty, Sparta could not survive without the helots. When Sparta went to war, the helots went too, as servants, porters, and sometimes even as lightly armed soldiers. They carried supplies, tended the wounded, and in rare cases fought alongside their masters. But service in war did not earn them freedom. A helot could risk his life for Sparta and still be subject to the cryptia the next year. The state made sure that no act of loyalty erased their status as property. The shadow over Spartan glory. Today, many people know Sparta for its warriors, the phalanx, the discipline, the legendary stand at Thermopylae. But the glory of Sparta rested on the backs of the helots. Without their labor, there would have been no time for full-time military training, no resources to maintain a warrior elite. The cryptia, the humiliation, the constant threat of death, these were not side notes in Spartan history. They were at the core of how the society worked. And that truth is what makes the Spartan story so unsettling. Behind the legends of heroism lies a system built on fear, control, and blood. The mock freedom trap, one of the cruelest tricks in Spartan history, was recorded by ancient writers as a test and a trap. On certain occasions, the Spartan state would promise freedom to helots who had served them well in war. The chosen men would be praised in public, paraded through the city, and told they were being rewarded for their loyalty. But behind the celebration was something far darker. According to Thucydides, in one infamous case, the Spartans gathered 2,000 of the most worthy helots, the strongest, the bravest, the ones most likely to inspire others. They crowned them with garlands as if honoring them for heroism. The city cheered. The men believed they were free. Then they vanished. No one recorded exactly how they were killed, but the implication was clear. The Spartans had quietly executed every one of them. It was a purge disguised as a reward, removing the most dangerous leaders before they could even think about leading a revolt. The earthquake and the siege of Ithome. In 464 BCE, Sparta shook, literally. A massive earthquake flattened homes, killed many citizens, and left the city in chaos. To the helots, this looked like a sign from the gods. It was the moment they had been waiting for. The helots of Messenia rose in rebellion, gathering their forces and fortifying the old stronghold of Ithome. There, they prepared for a long siege. The Spartans, already weakened, found themselves in a desperate fight to contain the revolt. Some accounts say the siege lasted years. The Spartans even called for help from Athens, an ironic twist, since Athens was often their rival. But once the Athenians arrived, the Spartans sent them away, fearing they might side with the helots. In the end, the rebellion was crushed, But the memory haunted the Spartans. The earthquake had shown how close they could come to losing everything. It hardened their resolve to keep the helots under constant, merciless control. A society built on fear. The more you look at Spartan history, the clearer it becomes. Fear was the foundation of their system. The cryptia killed leaders before they could rise. Public humiliation broke pride before it could become resistance. Mock freedom eliminated hope before it could take root. Every law, every tradition, every ritual was designed to keep the helots in a state of submission. The Spartans did not trust them, did not forgive them, and did not see them as people who could ever be equals. Even the glorious Spartan warriors, their bravery at Thermopylae, their discipline in battle, was possible only because the helots kept the state running. The warriors' freedom to train and fight came directly from the slaves' unending labor. The Festival of Whips. Not every punishment for the helots was hidden in the shadows. Some were done in front of crowds, in the name of tradition. One such event took place during the festival of Artemis Orthia. Here, Spartan youths were made to whip helots in public. Sometimes, the beatings were part of a competition to see who could endure the most strikes. Other times, the whippings were fatal. It was presented as a religious ritual, a way to honor the goddess and toughen Spartan boys. But for the helots, it was another message. Your suffering is entertainment. Your pain is a lesson for others. The night without sound. The cryptia was designed to be silent. No speeches, no warnings, just the quiet approach of trained killers in the dark. Imagine being a helot farmer, lying in your home after a day's work. The night is still. The fields are empty. Then, somewhere outside, you hear the faintest rustle, and you know it could be your last breath. That was the power of the cryptia. It wasn't just about the lives taken. It was about the countless others who would lie awake for years, never knowing if the next step in the dark was meant for them. The price of control. The Spartans like to think of themselves as masters of discipline and order, but their control over the helots came at a cost. They lived with constant paranoia. Every harvest season, every rumor of unrest, every gathering of helots could spark fear that another uprising was coming. The same system that made Sparta strong also made it fragile, a society that could not exist without the very people it feared most. The end of the Spartan system. Over time, Sparta's grip weakened. Wars with other Greek states drained their strength. The helots became harder to control, and the cryptia could not stop the slow erosion of Spartan power. By the time Sparta fell from dominance, the image of the fearless warrior state was already etched into history. But the truth behind it, that their freedom depended on the chains of others, was a truth often left unspoken. The story of Sparta forces us to face an uncomfortable reality. The legends we admire often rest on foundations we would rather ignore. Sparta's discipline, its victories, its culture's strength, all of it was built on fear, on cruelty, and on the relentless control of an enslaved people. And yet, without the helots, there would have been no Sparta, no Thermopylae, no legend of the 300. The question is, when we tell the story of Sparta, do we tell the whole story? Which do you think was the most terrifying part of the Spartan system? The silent hunt of the cryptia, the public humiliations, or the false promise of freedom? Comment below.